Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Welcome to another episode of Teachers Talkin'. As always, I am Dustin here with my co-host Ghazali, and we are just thrilled to be joined by Javier Payano today, a dedicated educator with 15 years of experience in teaching music and human values right here in the good old sweet home, Chicago.
Yes.
So Javier is passionate about integrating social and emotional learning into education. He's the co-founder of the Human Values Collective, which is an organization that empowers teachers to practice universal human values with their students. And so that's why today's episode is going to focus on teaching by example, SEL, and human values in education. And our key question for this episode is, how can teachers embody SEL and human values in order to create lasting transformation in their students? So before we dive into this conversation, Javier, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in education, and even a little about your Human Values Collective and what that's all about?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, you guys. I'm very excited to be here. Just a little background for me. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star, so I started playing guitar very young and, getting my power chords going and my hard rock and heavy metal and all that stuff. So that was me growing up. And then I in college, as I started to go into the education route, I met these students from Brazil and Latin America, and they were involved in this music for social change movement that was happening in Latin America. So there's this program in Venezuela specifically called El Sistema. And yeah, they just used music to bring social change to the impoverished youth in different cities and towns in Venezuela. So we just out of nowhere, as college students, created our own orchestra program at the nearby neighborhood school. Just like, didn't know what we were doing, but we saw this vision of what people were doing in Latin America. And that was the beginning of me understanding, like, oh, music has like a powerful impact on people's lives, and throughout that process, I connected with a professor at North Park University here in Chicago, Dr. Tom Zell. And he was the person who introduced me to this character-based education program centered in universal human values. And I started to learn about it. I went and did an internship at the school in Thailand. And I started to implement that in my classroom at a time that I was frankly burning out in the classroom. I wanted my students to be okay. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to be healthy and to do well in class. But the problem was I was very anxious and depressed. I was dealing with the same things they were dealing with. So it was like the blind leading the blind, right? When I went to Thailand and had this experience where I really went through this process of personal development and forgiving myself and forgiving other people in my life. And my colleague says I was loving before. I was a loving person before, but after I came back from this experience in Thailand, I was just like full power, like all the way, just giving love to my students from a full cup, because you could say I learned to love and forgive myself. So I just got so excited about this program, Education in Human Values. My wife and I co-founded a nonprofit organization, and we have a Sunday night meditation class where we talk about the value of the week. That's been going on for 7 years. And we are now training teachers to adopt this model of character education based in universal human values into their classroom. So that's what the organization is all about. And we're really excited at all the teachers we're working with.
Incredible.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I love your selection of music. I grew up in, I guess, the same genre that of music that you mentioned earlier. So tell me, who are the people that you have you wanted to emulate? Let me guess, one of them, Santana.
Absolutely, you nailed it. So Carlos Santana was one of two guitarists that originally inspired me to pick up the guitar.
Yes.
Can you guess the other one? Can you guess the other one?
Oh my! I would go with Guns N' Roses, Slash.
Very, very close one. Yeah, I do love Slash a lot. But Jimi Hendrix was the first guitarist that captured my imagination. I thought he was so cool and such an amazing person, just like also spiritually, like he had this wisdom about him. And he brought a lot of things on stage to send a message. So I always gravitated, and Bob Marley's another musician that I love. The Beatles, like people that are trying to bring a message of peace and love and unity. I always gravitated towards those musicians.
Oh, that's nice. It opens the door to my first question, which is going to be a doozy. So I'm just going to lay it on you. There's been debate about regarding the SEL and universal values. It's interesting that you went on the side of universal values, because there is the debate goes whether SEL should be going towards universal values, or should it go towards more of cultural and to a certain extent spiritual, religious backgrounds. Where do those come in as well? And like you say, in terms of music, Santana, it's the culture of it. It vibrates throughout the music. So to make something truly interesting, truly engaging, and captures the spirit of the students and their background, why did you go for the universal values instead of a cultural one? And maybe you could explain a bit about the school that you come from. What kind of students do you face?
Yes. So I come from a school that is fortunate in a lot of ways. Like we have a lot of resources, but culture is a area of growth of like wanting to make sure that everyone in the school feels safe and honored and valued. So that's very important to me. And so to answer your question of that debate between more universal values based or cultural values based, I think what I get excited about when I think of education and human values and my training is that the idea is for us to find those things that unify us across all cultures. So an example of that in our practice is there are 5 universal human values that are love, truth, peace, nonviolence, and right action. And if you look closely enough, in all cultures and all tribes and all creeds, there's an element of those reflected in like the 4 pillars or the 5 pillars of this way of thinking, of this school of thought. And so to me, I think that the people, no matter what tradition, no matter what religion, who are truly practicing like the essence of that practice, are arriving at some version of those 5 universal human values. And you can see it reflected in the way the people treat themselves or others in their action. So I'm searching for the thing that's going to unify as many cultures as possible and bring us all together to be able to speak. Because when we bring the religious conversation into it, people have a hard time and shut down. And there's this separation of church and state in schools, especially if you're a public school teacher like me. So I have to be very careful that for me, it can't have any religious connotation to it. But I think that practicing, and it's interesting because when I came back from the school in Thailand, I said, hey, I want to do this in school. I was talking to my assistant principal, and they're like, hey, love, truth, and peace. That sounds great. This is not a religious thing, is it? And so religion doesn't have a monopoly on love, truth, and peace and trying to be a good person, you know what I mean? And treating others well and treating yourself well and having good thoughts so that you can be happy and all of those things, you know, that belongs to all of us. That's human.
Oh, yeah. I love the answer. So then what role does the teacher play in the sense of we want to promote these universal values,
Yes.
love,
Yes.
truth, peace, and the cultural background of the teacher itself? Does it
Yes.
come into play? Or sometimes when you're like even giving examples of love, for example, could it be a cultural kind of example? Will you accept that, or would you want to have something a bit more neutral ground, you know? So in terms of the approach, do you allow any cultural intervention or usage in terms of like maybe even examples for the students to get closer to, in terms of if they have come from those kinds of different or mixed group backgrounds?
Yes. Yeah, when I am doing my best to be as inclusive as possible, I'm doing my best to include as many people as possible. And so for us, from a cultural perspective, we have our Heritage Month calendar. So as soon as we land in school, the school year, it starts Latinx Heritage Month. And then we roll right into that October LGBT History Month, November Native American. We're uplifting Native Americans and celebrating that. So there's a different, in my classroom, in my music class, there's a different project for each of those months where students have to find their favorite Native American artists, and then students say, oh, well, I don't know. I don't listen to Native American artists. And I'm like, okay, well, go Google it, go search it, go find one. And then they find really cool artists that now they're going to go and listen to. So it's for me doing my best to include as many people and give them opportunities to bring their own music into the classroom in that way. And then from values perspective, I did a activity last week, which was asking the students what are their 5 core values. If they were to identify what are the 5 things that they stand by and care about. And I think that's where we saw an exploration of like, what are those cultural values that the students had, because they had very different answers. And that was really cool to get them to think about that. I prepped them all week. Think about your 5 core values. On Friday, we wrote them down and they had time to share with each other. And why did you choose that? Oh, because in my family, we do this. And so we saw a lot of beautiful cultural values come out in that way. So making space for the students, and always, I just coming back to the teacher being the example, because often in education, I think we do a disservice to teachers in the teacher preparation programs where the default mode of correcting behavior is punitive, which shuts people down and ruptures relationship. And I think that a really big thing that a lot of teachers miss is punishing bad behavior, but not promoting the behavior we want students to embody. And so I think being whatever you want your kids to be more patient, whatever it is, you become the example of patience. That's like the only way to teach them.
I love that. I actually just released a newsletter the other day where I was kind of talking about that idea of it was really focused around the idea of telling students praising them for the good things instead of looking at the bad things, instead of saying like, no, that's the wrong answer. How do you shift your way of asking a question to a student so that you build that confidence and lead them in the right direction, instead of looking at it from that negative lens, and really looking at it from the more positive side of things when, specifically when doing questioning. And I love that you were kind of starting to talk a little bit about the teachers and what they need to do, which leads me to my question is like, what role would you say that teacher self-awareness and personal growth play in making SEL impactful in their classrooms?
Yes. I believe that you cannot expect people to behave above their own level of consciousness. Like you can, if a person has not gone on a personal growth journey, you cannot expect like this mature, super conscious adult behavior from them. So in a classroom setting, if you as a teacher are not regulated, I think it's very difficult for your students to be regulated. When I mean regulated, I'm talking about the nervous system, and I'm talking about being calm. Because a lot of the chaos that happens in the classroom, it may not look like it, but a lot of it comes from a feeling of not being safe in the classroom for one reason or another. So I believe if a teacher should so choose to take it upon themselves to be the example of calmness, even through challenging situations, that will only benefit them in the long run, because it will make the students more calm, because they will have an example of what a calm adult looks like. We all know, we all have adults that fly off the handle at the slightest inconvenience, right? And then there's also very legitimate stressors as a teacher right now in the world. So it's very legitimate for us to be in this constant state of triggered all the time, right? It is so common that it gets normalized. And so I think when we're talking about personal development, for me, and I'm speaking as a person who's been meditating since they were 6 years old. But if I were to define meditation, I would say the ability to be aware of your thoughts and your feelings so that they don't control you. And I think as an adult, to go on that journey, as a teacher, to go on that journey, and maybe it's not meditation, maybe it's walk in the park or journaling or some exercise that helps you to process those emotions, will only help you to be that example of a emotionally healthy adult, where the children need that example. What could be more important right now than helping students to develop that good character? So if the teacher continues to grow and continues to put a priority on their own personal growth and well-being, they're like raising the bar for all the students in their classroom. And when you believe that your students can do that, they will meet you at that standard.
I love that. And it really leads me right into just another question, something I think is, so when you do that level of reflection, personally, and then you go back to the classroom, how do teachers then go about creating a classroom environment then that supports the development of the social emotional skills for the students, right? Because you're talking about starting by understanding your own feelings and your own emotions. So then how do you translate that into your classroom environment and help the students to build that for themselves?
Yes. Dustin, I appreciate you so much, because you took this whole journey to talk about the self-development first. And usually people skip to this part, which is like, tell me what to tell my students, right? Or like, what do I do with my students? So it absolutely starts with first you practicing, let's say, the human values in your personal life to start to develop that awareness for yourself. And what do I want my students to embody? You start to have this conversation. How do I bring now the practice of education and human values into the classroom? The first thing that I did after attending my workshops and saying, let's go, starting now, September 2016, let's go, I wrote the value of the week on the board. So let's say it was patience, and then the thought of the week, patience is the key. And I just wrote it on the board. I didn't even say anything about it. And then the next week, I wrote the next value, grit. And the next week's thought of the week, no grit, no pearl. And I didn't say anything about it. And then the third week, and I forget, belonging, thought of the week, all belong here. And then finally a kid was like, what is that you're writing on the board? And then so I started, oh, this is a practice that I'm doing for my mental health. Every time I look at the board, I want to see a positive message. So this is belonging, and the thought of the week is all belong here. Let's say it together. 1, 2, ready, go. All belong here. Great. Let's start tuning. Play your A string. And that is all I did at the very beginning. There's a lot more that goes into it. There's 5 teaching techniques. The thought of the week is 1 teaching technique, but there's also song, storytelling, the silent sitting, the nervous system regulation, and then group activity. But when I'm starting and I'm coaching my teachers to just start by writing the thought of the week on the board and have like this discovery method of a kid, let a kid ask you first, and then respond to them. And this does something very special in it sets a classroom environment that starts on that note. It starts on that tone of like, oh, we're here to learn music, but we're also here to like make sure that we're paying attention to positive things in our brain, because we know that when we pay attention to positive things, that generates positive feelings in the body. And that's how I start to talk to the students about how their brain and their body work. And slowly over the course of the year, it's building more and more awareness of how they can be aware of their thoughts. And it's this slow process I've developed over the last 8 years. And it's really incredible. And it's something that I'm so grateful to be coaching teachers through right now.
Okay, I like the way that you seamlessly integrate the values into your lessons, because right now in many education systems, they face this difficulty of trying to embed the SEL and values education meaningfully into a curriculum that is already so packed. And at the same time, as you know, subjects can be very political in the sense that you have your academic subjects, English, math, science, which tend to push down values education, in the rung of importance. So what's your take on this?
My take on the importance of character education or social emotional learning is that we need character education more than ever before, especially now. And I understand the argument for the academic pursuits, because that has created incredible things in our world and industry. But we've also seen really smart people do really scary things. So it's not just about being smart. We need to have like what do we do with the intelligence? That's really what I'm concerned with. And I think we've spent enough time as a humanity like really worshiping intellect. And I think it's okay to start to become more heart-centered. The goal is alignment, is like strong intellect, strong heart. And if we have both of those, man, that's a really incredible citizen right there. That's a citizen who's going to use that intellect, and they're going to really help a lot of people. And we've seen it. We've seen really unlikely people from backwards places come out and really be of service to the world. So I really want to uplift the value of character education and say that it is something that's absolutely essential if we're going to continue to live on as a human species, because we're at a point where anything can happen now. And so if I'm bringing a child into this world in the future, like I want to help to create a kinder, happier world. And I think that values are a very seamless way to bring it into the classroom. And I had that challenge. I had a assistant principal tell me, he's like, this is great. And I love that you're doing SEL. Can you keep it to the first 5 minutes? And I said, challenge accepted. And so it's just every day, the first 5 minutes of class, we just do a little something, and it just sets the tone. And at the end of the class, I say, you've made today an amazing day just by you being you. There's no one like you in the whole world, and I like you just the way you are. And that's a quote from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He ended every show like that. And it's just a little expression of care, because you don't know if anyone has ever shown care for that child that day. And so I think that creates this classroom environment, and it's at the very beginning, at the very end, and sometimes things will pop up randomly, like a kid was playing ukulele and he's like, I can't get this E chord. And then the other kid leans over and says, hey, no grit, no pearl. And the kid goes, okay. And he kept trying, and he eventually, by the end of the class period, he got the E chord. So it starts to change the culture in the classroom, even without me having to do anything, being the example.
Yeah, I like that. Those examples really, I mean, they touch me because it's showing the authentic learning that happens when you bring these values into the classroom. How do you then train or coach your teachers? Because it doesn't come naturally. It's not easy to do what you just described. So what are some of the things or some of the skills that you train your teachers to ensure that they can effectively facilitate these deeper discussions and learning experiences?
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's so good. It's kind of the same thing. It's like I need to be the example for teachers. So I need to show teachers what is it that I do and give them lots and lots of examples. So I do that in different ways. The way the organization really started is I was doing the value of the week in my classroom, and then other teachers, other friends of mine in other schools were like, hey, can you send me the value of the week? And I just started like an email list, and I was just send, hey, here was what I posted on my board, and I would just send that. And that was like the beginning of our mailing list, essentially. We call it the value of the week email. So that goes out every week, and that's something free that anyone can sign up for. And you get the value of the week, the thought of the week. You get a song of the week. That group activity is like all 5 teaching techniques, and you can pick and choose what you want to use in your classroom. We're trying to take the thought out of it and the work out of it for the teacher. Once teachers kind of start digesting that, and they're getting used to the language of education and human values and how it works, they can start showing up to things like our Sunday night meditation. So Sunday night meditation, one person will facilitate the meditation for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then the rest of the time, there's someone who presents the value of the week. And so that's another opportunity for someone to see, oh, this is how I can include this in my classroom. So we say the value of the week is, I'm just trying to think of a random one off the top of my head. The value of the week is compassion. And the thought of the week is, if you spot it, you got it. My people, I just came up with that on the spot. So value of the week is compassion. Thought of the week is, if you spot it, you got it. How are we going to be compassionate to other people? And then we have a discussion, right? And so one of the the tenets of education and human values is we're always, the value and the wisdom and the knowledge is already inside of the student, but we're making this space where the student can bring the value out of it. We're embodying it as the teacher to inspire the student to bring that compassion or that value or whatever it is out of it. So leading a mini discussion at the beginning of class, how are you going to practice compassion this week? And so we model that every Sunday night on our Zoom meditation call. That's another way that teachers can get involved. And then if teachers want to go deeper, we have an online training course that's part of our membership where teachers can get hours of video training, resources, lesson plans, Google Slides. There's a thriving, growing community there where people can ask questions and check in with each other. And that's really the way we see teachers truly stay in this practice and adopt this new way of teaching truly. And so yeah, that for me has been a joy to watch the work that we do and how it's blossomed and how it's made an impact in the lives of teachers, because teachers need a lot of help right now. And so it's just my pleasure to serve them, because I just happen to discover something that really worked for me, and so I want to share with others.
It's just such a beautiful approach. But also, as you know, we get a lot of challenges and resistance when we try to do new things. Teachers do.
Yes.
So how can teachers, for one, I'd say, what challenges or resistance have you experienced, or have the teachers that you work with experience when, you know, moving in this direction? Like you kind of mentioned your assistant principal saying like, can you just keep this to 5 minutes? That's, you know, challenge accepted. And,
Yes.
and that's one. But what other challenges or resistance do you see teachers face? And, you know, how do you help them, or what do they need to do to try to overcome those obstacles?
Yes. So the challenges that I've experienced and the challenges that a lot of teachers that we work with have experienced include having unsupportive administration. There's sometimes administration that they're just like gone and it's just the wild, wild west. And sometimes there's administrators who are micromanaging everything. There's administrators that are good administrators that are there. They show up for you. They care about you. But then there's administrators who they're just trying to watch their back, you know, and if something goes down, it's like you against the parent. So I understand these challenges, and I understand too the time challenge, and as a teacher, putting your heart and soul into making a positive impact in the lives of students, and students just not learning, and how draining that is. And then all of the other things outside of the classroom, like communicating with parents and grading and taking papers home to grade, really doesn't leave a lot of humanity left for the teacher to be with their family, their loved ones, their own kids. So these are all really difficult things. And it often happens to the sweet, sensitive souls, those loving, caring teachers that want to make a positive change in the lives of students, that ends up being, in a way, the victims of a lot of this overload and overwork. You know, this thing of like the successful person being given more work to do, and so we don't know how to say no. And so for me, a lot of this work is first a desire to make a positive change in the lives of students through your well-being, without sacrificing yourself. We talk a lot about overwhelm and burnout in our community, and how teachers are kind of encouraged to give every last drop they have to the school for the benefit of the students. But no amount of passion will prevent you from burning out if you do not take the time to be well and to be healthy. So those are the first things I start thinking about when I'm working with teachers, is what are the things that you're doing that you don't need to be doing? Saying yes to a lot of things that for you are not having a positive impact on your classroom, on your students, or on yourself. When it comes to being challenged by other teachers or by administrators of like, why are you doing something new in your classroom? What has worked for me, because I did talk to the assistant principal, and I you know, said I'm doing this in my classroom, so she kind of approved it. But she gave me a challenge to keep it to the first 5 minutes. There may be principals there that are like, do not do this. Like, no, you cannot do this, right? I don't understand why. I feel like things are tipping more towards, we want to include SEL. There's different states with different SEL standards, but I think mostly principals will be in support of this. But if for whatever reason there's a unsupportive administrator, I would just go rebel, guerrilla tactics, and I would say, I wouldn't write it down on the board, don't put it in a Google slide, don't leave a paper trail, and just say it verbally to students, and verbally we will all know that we're practicing this value of the week, or find a way. So meditation is much more common now, but maybe 10 years ago or so, if you said meditation, that was like, no, don't talk about that. That's like a spiritual thing. I think now we're understanding like the benefits of meditation on mental health. So now it's more common. But if for whatever reason we can't use the word meditation, then I would say, oh, we're doing silent sitting. Or instead of meditation, I'll say nervous system regulation. What's the nervous system? Oh, let me tell you, parasympathetic nervous system, et cetera. We'll go and have that conversation. So it's a language game. It's finding the language that will either get people off your back or get people to join the movement and say, oh, that sounds really cool. And then you can start getting other teachers or admin who are confidants and they do want to bring positive change. And I think you're not just the example in your classroom, you're the example in your building. And if you're passionate about bringing this change and you've done it for a year or two and you see this positive change in your classroom and in your students, other people start to become attracted to that. I've had teachers tell me, it's like, Mr. Payano, what are you doing in there? You handing out candy to the kids? And I'm like, no, it's just a daily expression of care, you know, and just, you know, some life lessons that's going to help them navigate the challenges of life. And they really appreciate that.
Oh, that's links nicely to the question that I want to ask you. When the principal asks about, you know, what you're doing in the classroom and ask you to justify, you know, maybe you feel that you don't want to just do it for 5 minutes and you want to do it for longer. How do you persuade your management, your administration that there are long-term benefits of teaching SEL to students? We just can't see it now, but it has a tremendous impact. It's in the long term. It's more of like an investment rather than something that happens immediately. Now, how do you get people on board and sell an investment rather than something that's very tangible on the spot?
Absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is to try to find, is there in the local government, is there any kind of state mandate or something that says that you're allowed to teach social emotional learning? Because in most states here in the US, there is a social emotional learning standards for each state. So when whatever country you're in, that's something that you can turn to look up. For me, number two, I always try to get parents involved. And so whenever there's parent meet the teacher night or parent conference, or I'm sending emails home, I'm informing the parents about what I'm doing with human values in the classroom and why I'm doing it, because I care about the emotional well-being of the students. And when parents hear that, they're like, yes, I want that. And you can then go to the principal and say, hey, I've communicated with parents, they're all on board, they support this, they want this for their students. And that, for a lot of principals, helps them to be calm. It helps, like if the parents are happy, I'm happy kind of thing, you know? So that would be a great way to get those stakeholders invested. And I want to speak also to the students, because there are some students, when you introduce education and human values, hey, we're going to do this breathing exercise or whatever it is, some students are resistant to it because they've never experienced that before. It sounds very weird to them, but they're also the students who might need it the most because they don't know how to deal with their emotions. So I always tell students, this is all an invitation. I'm inviting you into this practice, but you never have to do anything. You could just sit there silently. And when they see the rest of the students doing the exercise, even the student that was the most resistant, by the time it's second semester, they start doing the heart high five or whatever exercise that we're doing, you know. So creating buy-in for them by always focusing on it's for the benefit of the students, the emotional well-being of the students, because if they're emotionally healthy, they will be academically healthy and all of the other things that we care about.
All right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Just one other hurdle that normally teachers face when it comes to values and SEL. How do you measure the success of your program? Because it's not easy to quantify values compared to a score in math, science, English. You know, it's not easy to quantify values, but I suppose you need to show that your program has impact to ensure that it gains traction. So how do you mitigate this?
This is a great conversation and question, the question of assessment in the character education community, because it's like, how can you prove internal transformation, right? So the most obvious and immediate proof is anecdotal evidence of you observing children. So for me, I have a lot of students at the beginning of the year, they're so caged and quiet and won't speak even to ask to go to the bathroom. And then by the end of the school year, I see them open up and they're making friends and they're more social. I have students who have exhibited rude behavior towards the beginning of the year, and then towards the middle of the year or so, they're like pulling out chairs for their partners and speaking kindly to each other and things like that, and students smiling more, and students generally being more happy. Students who had been truant and absent all of a sudden having better attendance. I've had students tell me like, Mr. Payano, I only came to school for your class today. You know, things like that. Like you're really being a positive force because you're allowing students to come to school, inspiring students to come to school. So that anecdotal evidence is really, really great. More difficult to capture, right? So the members in our community have access to our human values pre and post assessment. So we have this as a survey that we give out. It's more geared to high school students right now, but we're creating one for elementary as well. But asking students a variety of questions about their mental health, how they overcome challenges, their relationships with students, parents, and teachers. There's a variety of questions, and asking them what benefits that they feel that they have received from education and human values. So that is a way to assess probably the older students so that you can get a sense like, was practicing human values valuable for you in class this year? And we've every year got an overwhelmingly positive response from that. So, but that's a wonderful way to also give them the same survey at the beginning of the year and the end of the year to see their progress in multiple areas.
Wow. Just such a wonderful conversation across the board here. So topical. Like it feels like we are in a world where human values are crumbling. And this is just this is a conversation that helps to bring a lot more hope and light, I think. And so I really appreciate everything that you're doing and just this conversation. As we start to close things up, Javier, is there anything else that you would like to share, about the Human Values Collective, or, about the importance of SEL and implementing human values effectively that we haven't covered?
Absolutely. I know that schools, staff, admin, students, everybody's doing their best, but the education system, the way it has always been operating, was not built for the well-being of teachers, students, even admin, even parents, right? So I'm interested, and it's always kind of weird and freaky to bring some completely new thing into your work. But I honestly believe that this is the most simple, efficient way for us to change the way that we're doing education and make it more human-centered. So I'm just really excited about it. I'm excited for anyone who wants to make a positive impact in the lives of students while maintaining their own well-being. I know that on the team, we talk about the triangle a lot, which is the student, the teacher, and the parent, and that having all of these three in alignment, especially when it comes to character education and human values, is extremely valuable. So I encourage all teachers, parents, to connect with us, and I want to help build a movement where we're really inspiring education to move into a place of uplifting humanity of teacher and student, and for us to enjoy teaching and learning. Because when you say school, joy is not what comes up right now. And I want to build that world when you say school, everyone lights up, because it's really a place where we're honoring that spark of humanity in every person. So yeah, I would just encourage people to visit our website, connect with us, and learn more about human values. It's a global movement. It's in the public schools in Australia and Canada. So but it hasn't taken root here in the U.S. I wonder why. You know what I mean? So, but we're doing our thing. We're gonna get it going.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for being with us, for your incredible insights, your expertise around SEL and human values. This has really been an invaluable conversation. To all of our listeners, thank you for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and review and share the podcast. We want to continue to spread the word about SEL, about human values, about ways to continue to be better educators. As you know, we are here because we love to support teachers. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Ghazali, thank you for being here as always. And Javier, thank you so much for being a guest with us today. You guys will be able to find Javier and the Human Values Collective in our show notes. So thank you everybody, and we will talk to you next time.